We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It's Friday. We're winding down another week. And yep, I'm back in the saddle, back in my home state of Minnesota, back in my living room after spending about 4 days in Georgia. Love to get away to Georgia. My wife and I go down there frequently. We'll go there a lot this summer. And well, maybe not so much in the depths of the summer because it's hot as a motherfucker in Georgia in July and August. But we are going to be going down there quite frequently because we love it there. When you get to be older, like we are, the extent of your social life means going out to dinner, going to see sights. And we did that. We went to Jekyll Island, we went to Tybee Island like we normally do. And it's just fun to go out and do stuff. It's weird because when you're in your 20s, excitement takes on a different tack than it does when you're in your 60s. 60s, you don't need as much excitement. You just need some calm and quiet, maybe a little sun and some new things to see or some things you've seen but haven't seen in a while. So, anyway, we had a good time and we're back now and we'll be back for a while, probably going to Georgia in the end of May. So, we'll be back down there then. And of course, we'll keep doing the podcast and the TikToks as we do. Now, there's a lot of news to talk about. We got Donald Trump's trial, his violations of the gag order, um, Mike Johnson looking at putting up a bill for funding Ukraine, all kinds of crazy shit. Um, there's never a loss for things to talk about. That's one of the best things about doing this podcast, talking about politics. There's always some crazy shit going on. So we're never in a shortage for material. Something happened last night. I don't know all the details, but I know the essence of what went on. You'll remember that at one point, a while back, Israel essentially bombed a facility in Syria that was Iranian, and then of course Iran then had to reciprocate, and they bombed something in Israel. Now, Joe Biden went to them and said, look, they got you, you got them. Let's just stop this shit now. We don't need an escalated war. He even told Israel, and Netanyahu said, listen, if you escalate this thing, we're not going to be a part of it. You're not going to get our help. So you better not fucking do it. But as I've told you many times before, the guy running Israel is basically a miniature Donald Trump, psychopathic, narcissistic, fucking authoritarian wannabe. That's who he is, Netanyahu. So, of course, last night, in spite of the fact that they've been told to just let this go, now Israel has struck a target in Iran. Now, it's not a full scale war, it's kind of a pissing contest. We hit you, you hit us, well, we hit you back. And now Iran's going to hit them back. And it's potentially something that would escalate the war. I mean, into a war, I should say. And the problem with it is it's going to raise gas prices. It's going to create all kinds of problems. Now, Joe Biden basically told Israel, if you escalate this, we're not going to help out, and there's going to be ramifications for it. He didn't say what they would be. He was hoping that they'd be afraid enough to just not do it and not risk having America, the United States, do something in return. And I'm not talking about a military thing, I'm talking about funding or taking away something. Well, Joe Biden's bluff has been called now. They did exactly what Joe Biden told them not to do. Now, the question is, what is Joe going to do? He has to react to this. There's a lot of controversy and a lot of dissension in this country about the Israeli Hamas attack. And now we got Iran in the mix. What is Israel going to do? But more importantly, now that they've done what they've done, what is Joe Biden going to do? It's going to be a tough choice. This is kind of a no-win situation. You go against Israel, you get shit. You go against Hamas and the Palestinians, you get shit. Nobody likes the Iranians because they're backed by Russia. But the fact of the matter is, we don't need a much bigger fighting situation in the Middle East than we already have. This is going to be a test for Biden, what he does. I'm not sure what it'll be, but I will tell you this, Biden needs to do fucking something. instead of dancing around saying, well, if you do that, just maybe we could be. I understand why he's doing it. I'm not blaming him for doing it. He was pushing these people to the limit, hoping against hope that they would take the threat and not do anything. But again, we got a crazy motherfucker, Netanyahu, running Israel, and he did exactly what Joe Biden told him not to do. So, what's going to happen? I have no fucking clue. No fucking clue at all what's going to happen. But we'll see, and we'll stay on top of it and give you any information that we get here. And hopefully this can settle down a little bit. We've got enough problems with Ukraine and Russia. We've got enough problems with Israel and Hamas. We don't need to get an Iranian situation in the mix either. All right. Got some emails. Actually, the first three were posts on the podcast page. First one comes from Bill. He said, episode was great. I am now a new listener. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Trump has done the crime. Now he has to do the time just like any other American. You're absolutely right. He does get special treatment, but ultimately, he will pay the price and he's not going to like it. In his mind, he thinks he's going to win. That's how delusional he is. And that's why he always delays things. He figures if I just have a little bit more time, something mystical and magical, some miracle will happen where I'll be pulled out of it. Somebody will bail me out, or I'll come up with something, or I'll say something that gets me out of it. That's what he really believes. Unfortunately, it's a fool's errand because he doesn't have anybody that's going to bail him out, and there's nothing he can say or do to get out of this mess. He's stuck, he's sinking, and he's going to go down for the third time in the not too distant future. All right. Next one. Demetriarch. Only way civil war will happen more than a couple of days is if Trump gets back in. Surely no Democrat president or sane capitalist will just sit and let the economy be destroyed without taking action. Yeah, I agree. I agree. I've said this before. You know, we always hear from the Trump-lefucks, oh, there's going to be a civil war. Well, Donald Trump's criminal case started. We had 50 fucking Trump-lefucks coming out of a clown car, and that's all they had at the criminal trial. There isn't going to be large groups of Trump-lefucks coming out. They're too afraid of either being put in jail or some pretty heavy pushback by the current president, Joe Biden. What I am concerned about is, and I'm really not that concerned because it's not going to happen, but what I would be more concerned about is if Donald Trump won the presidency. There are enough people in this country absolutely terrified of that prospect and what this country would become should he become president. I'm afraid some people might act irrationally because they think their life and their country is coming to an end. Not unlike what the Trump-lefucks thought when Joe Biden won, but it's a little different scenario because that was all just made up fantasy bullshit. With regards to Donald Trump becoming president, that's more realistic. But again, I've told you this before. There's no way Donald Trump wins the presidency. There's no way at all. I'm just saying. All right, this next one comes from Aurora Borealis. As a convicted felon, would he even be able to vote in the 2024 election? I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, I think it's different in different states, and I don't know how it plays out with a federal election. But as far as I know, he would not be able to. But we'll see. I don't think our biggest concern is whether or not Donald Trump can vote. I don't think prior to being in politics, I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't take the time to vote ever. He's a lazy motherfucker. All right. Next one says, hey, Mike, was good to catch up with you last week, and thanks again for having me on the show. Just wanted to share this with you. While I know polls don't matter, I think the tide is turning in Joe's way. A lot of folks said the so-called hush money trial was no big deal. I'll tell you what, if I was facing just one charge, I'd be freaking the fuck out. And the DA would not be wasting their time if it was no big deal, no matter what the Trump cult and media tells you. This attachment from Yahoo News tells you a lot of us believe it is a big fucking deal, like Joe would say. Just goes back to what you've been telling the boomer brigade. No way Trump wins in November. People are starting to pay attention and it's starting to show in the polls, the news, and he said the polls again. We need to still ignore them and stand strong and vote. Then till the next time, your buddy from Texas, Jace. Yeah, Jace was on the show a while back. And remember, he is a reformed Republican, a conservative Republican. But when Donald Trump got into the business, Jay said, fuck that shit. I'm going to try to deal with somebody who's not going to crush this country and our democracy. Thanks, Jace. You're welcome back anytime. All right, the next one starts out by saying, hello, Mike. Been a while since I've written. I've been listening to your podcast and always enjoy them. Some of the talk shows have different opinions of the so called election interference trial evidence. I, for one, would like to know what was the date that he had the sexual tryst with Stormy Daniels, because everyone says DT had his mini mushroom affair while his wife was home with a baby. That can't be right. The kid in question was born in 2006 and the election was in 2016. That is true. However, the affair happened in 2006. The only reason it became a thing in 2015 and 2016 wasn't the affair. And this is what I've said before. It's not about him having sex or even paying Stormy Daniels. That's not what this is about. This is about his attempt to cover it up. It did happen in 2006, but when it got to be about 2015, he thought this thing is going to come back to bite me. So let's just be safe and pay her off. So it did happen when she was pregnant with Barron. Anyway, she goes on to say that would mean he would have to have been around 10 years old. Are they saying he had this 13-minute interlude in the past when the kid was a baby? Then they say his wife is so upset about what he did. Um, has she forgotten that she was the other woman before she became a wife? She knew he was a cheater and a liar, and then he got involved with him. I don't have any sympathy for her feelings. As for his actions trying to hide the monetary exchange between Stormy, that's what he does. Scratch a liar, find a thief. With that being said, thanks for listening, Shirley. Yeah, so that's what it was. It was 2006. Barron was born at that point. 18 years later is 2024, and he is currently 18. As I said, the affair happened in about 2006, but it wasn't until 2015 that he got worried about it coming back and hitting him in the face. This is why it's weird. He says, well, I just didn't want Melania to know. Really? You waited 10 years and now you're worried that Melania is going to find out? But instead, you start paying this woman off just before the election. Yeah, I think it's pretty clear what you were trying to do. And if that's what you were trying to do, well, motherfucker, that is election interference and you're guilty. All right. Thanks, Shirley. I appreciate it. Next one says, "Hey, Mike, did you see the Piers Morgan what that Piers Morgan said on Fox that Dirty Diaper Donnie should just ignore the judge Juan Marchand and go to Barron's graduation? I hope he tries it. I'd love to see Donnie held in contempt, preferably jailed. I'll even do one better. How about he skip both and see what happens?" Well, I don't think he'll be hit with contempt at that point. I think the judge has come out and said, listen, if you don't show up, I'm putting out a warrant for your arrest and the police are going to come get you. So that's what I would do, Donnie. I would ignore the judge. He's nobody. Go ahead, go to Barron's graduation if you're so worried about it. The word is that you haven't gone to any of the other kids' graduation, so I don't know why this is one is different, but you want to play the victim, so you want to cry and whine about this. I wouldn't listen to the judge. Just go. What's a fucking warrant? What's the worst they can do? Cuff you and put you in jail? Donnie, you're a tough man. You could handle that shit. All right. The email goes on to say, according to Michael Cohen, Trump didn't attend the graduation of any of his other four kids. That surprised me. I figured he'd be at least attending Ivanka's. He really is just the best family man. I see why Trump fucks like him. Thanks, Eric. All right. This one comes from Ayana. It's it astounds me to see what Donald Trump has done to the country. The country has always had things to work on, but to see the state it's in now is absolutely amazing to me. Yet here we are. I often have told my husband that Obama winning 2 terms for president caused some white Americans and even some black Americans to lose their minds. The level of delusional thinking of these people is no longer funny. It's actually very sad. And I can't wait until this is finally over. Hashtag mentally drained. Ayana. I've said this before. I said Donald Trump is the punishment for this country having the audacity of electing a black president. I mean, this did freak people out. It's weird, it's stupid, but they were mad about it. And they decided to go way right to punish this country and the people that voted for Barack Obama. I'm convinced that's why we are where we are. The redneck, mouth breathing, red meat eating, stupid pieces of shit couldn't handle it. It made them mad. And you know what made them even madder? Barack Obama was pretty successful. He took the economy from the depths of the abyss that George W. Bush left it in and brought it back, brought it so far back that he gave Donald Trump a boost when he took over. A black man had the audacity to become president and be successful at it. Well, that motherfucker, that's what it was about. That's what it's still about. And they're scared to death about the prospect of another person of color becoming president again. That's why I'm really liking the fact that Kamala Harris is the vice president and Biden's as old as he is. They see the possibility of another black president, a woman black president of all things, and that scares the fuck out of them. All right, the next one says, "Hi, Mike. Just a brief explanation as to why Judge Merchan doesn't hold court on Wednesdays in Trump's case. The judge attends to much less conspicuous cases in Manhattan once weekly mental health court, where selected mentally ill offenders agree to closely monitor treatment in hopes of getting charges dismissed and their lives on track. A shout out to Old Soul. I hope you're doing well and that whatever issue you're dealing with, which kept you from joining Mike for your usual duet podcast, resolves itself soon and to your benefit. Keep up the good fight, Mike, and you to Old Soul, Jack T. Well, of course, Old Soul was on yesterday, and it was good to see her back again. I got to tell you, Old Soul is a special kind of person. She's got a good job. She keeps very busy. She's got a daughter, and yet she still finds time to help out young women in need who need a place when they're dealing with their reproductive issues. And she opens the door for just anybody who needs it. That's how kind of person she is. And when that isn't enough, she's going to prisons to teach prisoners how they can vote. She's a better person than I. She's a far better person than I. And we're very fortunate to be able to have her on the show when she's here, generally weekly, but obviously sometimes something comes up. But we were glad to see her back yesterday. All right, the next one comes from John. This was a post on the podcast page. Loving it. I often catch myself laughing and agreeing with things you say. Just recently found you on the podcast, enjoying it every day. Well, I thank you for that, John. And you know, it's weird. I've been noticing with the podcast, more so the audio than the video. And that kind of makes sense because the video primarily features my face, and that's certainly not a draw. But the audio podcast, just the audio portion, has really risen in listeners, like almost doubled in the last couple months. So that's awesome. I appreciate it. The more, the merrier. All right, the next one says, "Hi, Boomer. So great to hear Soul again. She always has a different perspective. I try to have a different perspective, but in the words of Curly of the Three Stooges, I try to think, but nothing happens." Read the Beverly Hillbillies. The show often featured Earl Scruggs and Lester Flatt. Earl was a soft spoken guy from North Carolina who literally created a new genre of music when he invented an electrifying way to play a five-string banjo. I spent 45 years trying to do it, and it's hard and very precise. This kid somehow developed it standing in his barn. Now, Earl's wife, Louise, was a genius as well. She alone recognized that urban and suburban kids were the key for the survival of bluegrass music. And she's the one that would make key business moves like getting them on that show and hitting college campuses hard. It's arguable that Louise Scruggs saved bluegrass music commercially. Earl died a multimillionaire while his contemporaries all died broke. The Scruggs family would sadly also suffer devastating personal tragedies. Buddy Ebsen, Jed, was a vaudeville dancer and just missed playing the Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz. Nancy Culp, Miss Jane, and Ebsen were conservative and liberal, respectively, and absolutely loathed each other. Culp would later dabble in Pennsylvania Democratic politics, and Ebsen would actively work to thwart her. Okay, boom. Here's to Don Snorleone, nodding off and rolling out of his chair while exercising various bodily functions, all simultaneously and at the same time. Today would be good. Best Garage Door Jeff. P.S. The first TV show I have conscious memory is You Bet Your Life with Groucho Marx, who also always felt was the core of Ellen Alda's Hawkeye's character on MASH. You know, it's funny you should mention that. I've always said that too. You know, Hawkeye on MASH was very popular, Ellen Alda, and just the way he talked, the pacing and the tempo and the way he was kind of a smart aleck, he did really play off that Groucho character. I've never heard anybody else say it except me, but of course now we've got Garage Door Jeff chiming in, and clearly we've got some kind of connection here, some kind of mental connection, because I agree wholeheartedly, and I've said it many times, and most people look at me like, what the fuck are you talking about? Well, Jeff, I think you and I are just that much far above all these other people that just can't fucking see it. It seems pretty obvious. All right, the next email. Hi, Mike. I have an important message for all Republicans out there. A daily dose of sarcasm from Panzer. The turning of Roe v. Wade in 2022 was a pure act of God given to us by his true and only prophet, Donald J. Trump. Any other interpretation is fake news, a hoax, and a witch hunt. True Republicans know that under Democratic law, every evil woman in this country could have their way. They could get an abortion 2 days prior to birth, even 10 years after birth, if they felt like it. This is fact. Democrats need to make their own research, like Republicans do so well. Real Republican needs to remember that this country was successfully built on white men dictating every woman what is best for them, and so too for all humanity, and they are truly following God's will. Go MAGA, Panzer. As I said, Panzer's had occasion to send notes that are strictly sarcasm. If some of you are out there and not realizing it's sarcasm, you're probably saying, that motherfucker, why did Mike put him on? It's sarcasm. And I enjoy sarcasm. So have at it, Panzer. Next one says, Dear Mike, well, I was thinking and I was wondering what your viewers thought of my theory, so I thought I would share it. You have the Electoral College over there, which means you can lose the popular vote and still be president. I figured that much out. I figured that much out, although I still don't quite understand. And you have all these red states that are quite often swing states, and it is these states that tend to be developing these draconian laws that actively and negatively affect women, black people, and LGBTQ plus people. These people tend to be more liberal as far as voting is concerned, and I noticed how the Republicans like to cheat as much as they can in elections. They make registering difficult, voting harder in liberal districts, they gerrymander, etc. They're also quite well organized and long thinking about their strategy too. So my idea is that they make these laws to drive these liberal voters out of these swing states and have a better chance of getting a Republican in the White House. I think the only way to stop these people cheating and persecuting the liberal voters is to dismantle the Electoral College and to centralize the voting process. I know I'm giving them much credit, much more credit than you think these Republicans have, but they have been manipulating the right wing voters since the 80s and have been working on these strategies for decades with the help of their rich backers, and those aren't idiots. I know it sounds borderline conspiracy theory, but considering the backlash the lawmakers in these states are getting politically, I truly can't see a reason why they are flogging these general unpopular policies when only a small percentage of the population agrees with them. What do you think? Sincerely, Angela the Brit. Well, Angela, I've said the same thing. It makes no sense that they keep embracing all these unpopular ideas and ideology. It makes no sense. It's as if they're trying to throw the election in November, or it's just that they can't or are unwilling to admit they're wrong and try something different. Instead, they're going to try to shove this down the throats of all of us, and then somehow we'll realize, oh my God, they were right, and then vote the way they want us to vote. Now, in terms of the Electoral College, there has been a lot of talk about dismantling that. It's long, um, it's long past its expiration date, and frankly, I don't know that it ever did any good. But I think there will be an effort to get rid of the Electoral College. That would make sense. And that would take away any gerrymandering or any of the bullshit that the Republicans want to do, and none of it will be effective at all. So we are talking about it in this country. And hopefully, after we get some power in the House and the Senate, we can actually look at that prospect. All right. Thanks, Angela. All right. The next email. Hey, Mike, I've been getting very confusing news today, and I was hoping you might be able to make sense of it. Late last night, I heard a report that the orange turd publicly agreed with some MAGA moron blowhard that liberals were attempting to get on the jury to make sure he doesn't have a chance, and it was up to them, good hearted listeners of his, to stop this from happening. Knowing that's in direct violation of his gag order, I was very excited to see what Judge Juan Marchand said, or what he would say this morning. All I got was crickets. What the hell? There was a report that after hearing the rant, one of the jurors stepped down. Still no words of reprimand. Did I miss something? I thought it would be a severe reaction. As far as I know, it wasn't even mentioned. All right, I'll talk to that. Yeah, I think everybody felt that way. Jesse Waters was on Fox News, and he was saying that liberal activists were infiltrating into the jury and they're going to swing it for the liberals and just go against Donald Trump because they hate Donald Trump, which is all a lie. That's not true. And then Donald Trump repeated that information. He didn't post, uh, he didn't repost anything. He wrote it in his own hand and added to it. So it made it more original. And yeah, he did do that, and he did violate the gag rule. Most people, including myself, thought that yesterday morning, when they went back in session after a day off, that Judge Marchand would drop the motherfucking hammer. That's what we thought he'd do. But he didn't. And you're absolutely right. He didn't even say anything to Donald Trump about it. He did admonish the media for giving out information about jurors. There were two jurors that stepped down. We went into court yesterday morning with seven jurors. One guy, he was lying about shit and they kicked his ass out. And then the other person was getting calls from friends and neighbors when Jesse Waters described who this person was and where she lived and her education and stuff. And she was getting nervous because her friends and family figured out it was her, and she was afraid some of the Trump-fucks would. So she was asked to be excused, and she was. So we went from 7 jurors down to 5 jurors first thing yesterday morning. But as luck would have it, things took off during the day. They ultimately seated the 12 jurors that will be on this case. They seated one alternate juror, and they need to seat one more. Or, I'm sorry, not one more, 5 more. And they should be able to do that today, presumably. And then that would mean that the case would start with opening arguments on Monday, which is problematic for Donald Trump because you start the criminal case and now we're in it. On that same day, on Monday, there's also going to be a hearing as to whether Donald Trump's guy who put up the bond is legit, and he's not. So a lot of shit is going to happen that day. Now, Juan Marchand did a couple of things. He didn't do what we expected by coming out and hammering Donald Trump, but apparently, to everything in these proceedings, there is a process. So first thing he did is he set up a hearing for next Tuesday. And this hearing is going to hear the complaints from the district attorney regarding Donald Trump violating the gag order. And then Donald Trump's people will try to dispute it, and they won't because they can. It's all on fucking videotape and in print. But what the DA is asking for, now this is going to piss you off at first, but you have to understand why they're doing it. The DA is asking, according to law in this case, for a fine of $1,000 for each infraction. So we're talking about $7,000. There were 7 infractions, at least at this point. Now people will say, well, $1,000, that's nothing to Donald Trump. That won't get him to stop. No, it won't. However, it's like a process. It's like, when I told you I got forced out of my job because of my age, they call you on the carpet one time. Nothing really happens. They wait 6 months, they call you on the carpet again. Nothing happens. But that third time, that motherfucker, that's the time when they get him. Now, in this case with Donald Trump, they'll hit him with $1,000. He'll pay it. Of course, he'll do it again. Now the judge comes back and says, listen, motherfucker, I warned you, and you still did it. Now you're going to jail because Judge Juan Marchand isn't a guy that's going to fuck around with this, and he can't afford to turn this case into a circus. He won't have it, and he can't afford to somehow taint the jury because Donald Trump is trying to intimidate them. Now, if you want an indication as to Judge Juan Marchand's attitude about Donald Trump and his lawyers, something happened at the end of court yesterday. Now, since they're going to be starting the trial presumably next week, the defense, Donald Trump's team, said, listen, we'd like to get a list of the 3 witnesses they're going to start out with. The district attorney, the prosecutor said, no, we're not going to do that because clearly Donald Trump is going to send his mouth breathers after him. So no, we're not going to do that. Now understand, this is just a cordial thing that most prosecutors and defense attorneys do in these situations. But I think the prosecution made a good choice in this because, well, we're seeing what's happening. So then the defense team went to the judge and said, this is not fair. We've got to do this. And then, of course, the prosecution said, we can't do it. Otherwise, it puts them at risk. And the judge looked at the lawyers and said, yeah, he makes a good point. So, no, we're not going to release that information. So the next step for the defense team was, well, how about this? How about this? How about we only get it so the lawyers can see it and we won't give it to Donald Trump? And the judge said, yeah, nah, that's not going to work either, which basically said to the defense, I don't trust Donald Trump and I don't trust you lawyers. And that's a bad position to be in going into a trial. So while Judge Marchand hasn't done anything as yet with regards to the gag order, I think what he really wanted to do is get this jury in place. He didn't want any delays in trying to screw it up because I think that's what he thought Donald Trump was trying to do. Get the jury in place, get the alternates in place, get the trial in process, and then hold him accountable. I don't like it any more than you do, but I can understand the reasoning behind it. All right. The second thing, what has gotten into the head of our illustrious Speaker of the House? Did he miraculously grow a conscience after his trip to Mar-a-Lago to kiss a dirty diapered ass? He came back and is trying to push through funding for Israel and Ukraine. The right side of the House is up in arms, but this and threatening it's going to be the last thing he does as Speaker, but he keeps pushing. I've written you in the past saying this sometimes feels like an alternative universe, and I'm getting that feeling again. Can you make sense of any of this? I've been looking all day for answers to these conundrums, but haven't found one. Why would he want to be like Why would somebody like Mike Johnson want to be doing this? And what the hell am I missing with the Lord and Savior of MAGA Town? Not being warned or worse for his actions. Help me out, man. I just don't get any of this. Your friend, Paul. Well, Paul, yeah, I've heard a lot of things about Mike Johnson. Mike Johnson's in a pickle. This whole funding for Ukraine is something that needs to be done. Otherwise, we could be put in a bad situation with Russia. You make the mistake of saying the right side doesn't want Mike Johnson to do it. A small faction of the right side doesn't want Mike Johnson to do it. A larger portion of the Republican Party does want them to do it because they see the importance of it. So he's got this small faction of people, 8, 10, 15 people that are trying to force him out. And they say if he puts it up for a vote, then they'll put up a vote of no confidence and try to kick him out. Here's what I think is going on. It's one thing to play these political games, but we're dealing with the safety of this country if we don't stop Russia and don't help Ukraine. Even Mike Johnson knows that, and the majority of the Republican Party knows that. They'd all vote for it. You notice they haven't put it up, and the Republicans fighting against it. No, Mike Johnson has refused to put it up, so it couldn't be voted on because he knew it would pass quickly with the likes of the Democrats. Here's what I think actually happened. There's not much time left in the session. Mike Johnson wants to ride this out because Hakeem Jeffries will be the Speaker of the House in January of next year. But here's the deal. The Democrats really want this funding to go to Ukraine because it's so important. Mike Johnson knows he has to do it, but he's been, obstructing just like Republicans do because of MAGA. He's afraid MAGA is going to kick him out, vote him out. So what I sense happened, and I don't know this to be true, absolute fact, but what I'm sensing is that the Democrats said, look, Mike, you put up the Ukraine thing, you put up the Israel thing, you do this, we'll make sure they don't kick you out. Because in any kind of no confidence vote, typically Democrats vote against the Speaker of the House. They're not going to help save a Speaker of the House if he's Republican. But in this instance, because of the importance of the Ukraine war funding, they are probably going to save his life. And I think this will be a good thing for the Republicans because it'll finally expose MAGA for how weak they are. So they're trying to threaten Mike Johnson to do their bidding, and Mike Johnson is saying, fuck yourself. And he's going to get help from the Democrats, both on the bill and, of course, when they try to vote him out. And there's no way, if you've got half the Republicans and all the Democrats voting for Mike Johnson, their plan isn't going to work. Again, this is just what I see and just my analysis of what I see and how I believe it to happen. Nobody's given me inside information, but that seems like the only possible explanation. All right, we are going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. All right, we are back and we do have a few more emails. It's funny. I've talked to other people doing podcasts and they'll say, how do you get emails? I never get emails, maybe one or two a month or something like that. I said, I don't know. The people who listen to the podcast, I encourage them to participate. I think one of the reasons why people keep sending emails is because I read all the emails. I respect their input and I let them show their input and let their voices be heard. And that's what this show is all about. I mean, a lot of people think, oh, you're the rational boomer. I'm not the rational boomer. There is no the rational boomer. Rational boomer is a premise for the podcast and the TikToks. We're all rational boomers, whether we're young or old or whatever. We're people of a like mind. Um, but that's the key. You know, I think a lot of people who have podcasts like to think about this as it's my show. It's all about me. Everybody's here to see me. I'm kind of the ringmaster, the shit stirrer, if you will. The show is about, and the TikToks are about all of us and people of a like mind because me alone can't do shit. It's me and all of you that give us some power and some strength. So for those podcasters who wonder how you get so many or so many emails, read the motherfuckers online and let people express their opinions. All right. Here's a guy that has a tendency to express his opinion, and I love hearing his stuff. It's very thoughtful, and sometimes I give him pushback about it. And some people say, "Oh, you're too hard on this guy." Uh, this is the Z Man, and the Z Man is somebody who's similar to my age, I think. And people have to understand when we were young, like in the '70s, giving each other shit, that was part of the fun of being young. Nobody took it to heart. You would say stupid shit to your friends because they might say stupid shit. And then you'd go back and forth and take the shit. And they're still friends of mine today. So don't get too worked up if I give Mike, the Z Man, or anybody else shit. Here's the deal. I've always given people shit all my life. If I give you shit, that just means you're part of the family. All right. Hey, Boomer, it's been a while. I'm paying attention, though. Well, I would fucking hope so. There are many news reports stating what you have been saying all along. Trump is melting away along with his followers, from what I'm reading. Now, there is another story. Mike Johnson, according to another astute creator, is exposing that Mike Johnson must not be underestimated. His little meeting with Trump seems to have begun to move him into a position of power like McConnell. He is trying to get all the Ukraine package through. If he succeeds and survives, it will make him very powerful and restore Republican power and competence. I felt always there is something going on with this guy, and he needs to be reconsidered as a threat. He could wind up running the party. We need to stay focused beyond the trial. I hope the Democrats are not ignoring the evidence. Z Man. Well, Z Man, I will tell you this. You're giving Mike Johnson far too much credit. Clearly, the fuck doesn't know what he's doing. He's in a pickle now. He knows he's got to pass this Ukraine thing for the sake of the country, for the sake of the world, and for the sake of his party. The MAGA group is dead set on destroying democracy and the Republican Party. He's in kind of a tight position. And I will tell you this, you might think Mike Johnson is smart, but I guarantee you one thing. Hakeem Jeffries is a lot fucking smarter. And if anybody's getting played here, it's Mike Johnson. Mike Johnson is getting played. I heard somebody else say this, and we've talked about this before, and it kind of makes me angry. And I know, Z Man, you're not saying this, so I'm not calling you out on this. Somebody sent me another letter and said, "Well, I heard. Here's the deal. Mike Johnson is going to do this with Ukraine and get all kinds of positive support, and then." And then when the election comes and Biden wins, then Mike Johnson um, isn't going to give the oath of office to the new Democrats in the House, giving them the majority, and then he's going to send the election back to the House or the legislature, and then Donald Trump will win. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. That's absolute bullshit. On January 3rd, when the Democrats win the majority in the House, Mike Johnson won't even be the Speaker of the House. It will be Hakeem Jeffries. Secondly, as I've told you before, there is a law that says a Speaker of the House can't refuse to give the oath of office to a duly elected um, representative or senator. They can't. The only thing that can be done with somebody that uh, somebody doesn't like or maybe did something wrong is you've got to give him the oath of office. He's got to take the position, and then you can try to exile him the fuck out after the fact. Mike Johnson's not that smart. If he is, he wouldn't be in the position he is in now. You think he's going to do this and he's going to get a little positive feedback. MAGA's going to hate him. The Republicans who stand with him are just going to take a sigh of relief and thank God they survived that one. And here's the other thing you got to consider: it is now mid-April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November. That's 7 months before the election. He doesn't have much time in this session. He's got some other things to be concerned about too. What if more Republicans leave office early? Now, there was a new one that said he isn't going to run for reelection, and he's only 36 years old. So everything about the Republican Party is depleting. I'm not saying you don't be cautious, but you're giving them too much credit. Mike Johnson is a failure. He's not a good politician. That's why Donald Trump uh, can affect him so much. And in the same vein, he goes down there and pats Donald Trump on the butt. And now all of a sudden he's supporting him. If what you're saying is true, you would have to suggest that Donald Trump has power. Donald Trump's power is diminishing every day, and it's going to be worse until it's gone in the next couple of months. Donald Trump is not going to be the powerhouse in the Republican Party. He may still be at this point, but his power is fucking waning. Mike Johnson's just looking to fucking survive, and that's the best he can hope for. The Republicans have no way out going into the November election. They can't pull a rabbit out of their fucking hat. There's not enough rabbits at this point. They can't. So, um, Z-Man, I've said this before and I'll say it again. There are people out there that are so used to being kicked in the ass by Donald Trump and the Republican Party that they go out there and they're scared and they're constantly looking for something to be worried about. Stop that. Stop that. We've got them on the run. We are going to kick their ass, and there's no two ways about it. No matter what Mike Johnson does, he's been nothing but a failure since he's been Speaker of the House. He's proven to be weaker than Mike or Kevin McCarthy, and that's fucking saying something. Don't give him too much credit. He's just trying to survive at this point, and he may or may not, depending on if the Democrats allow him to do it. And if the Democrats allow him to do it, understand Hakeem Jeffries and the Democrats are a lot smarter than he is. And if they're going to allow him to survive, there's a reason for it. There's something they're going to get out of it. All right. Thanks, Z-Man. All right, the next one. Hi, Mike. Well, we started off with a setback or two, but we got there. With the jury set and only needing a few alternates, I'm guessing the trial will start with opening statements on Monday. I bet Donnie is figuratively and maybe literally shitting himself. I agree. He needs delays because it's all he has left. I don't know if he understands how screwed he is. I don't really think he does. I think anytime he gets a delay, he thinks he's going to be able to pull off a miracle, and that's just not happening. His lawyers need to prevent him from talking, as before the trial the other day, he basically admitted to the payment and called it legal fees. He might have the right to remain silent, but definitely not the ability. There is a hearing next week on whether or not he's violated the gag order, which the prosecutors are saying he's violated 7 times now. They need to increase the gag limits, maybe physically gag him or toss him in jail. He won't stop until he's forced to. Did you see the report he had to be admonished by his own attorneys for being on his phone during court? No, I did not hear that. Fucking A. Apparently, he even took calls as the trial was starting today. I'm not expecting him to get through the entire trial without being removed from the court and being forced to watch from a separate room, maybe with a coloring book or something to keep him entertained. Lastly, I'm starting to post my TikToks to my YouTube page now. I started tonight after it seems like TikTok throttled a lot of creators' videos, including mine. As of writing this, my last 6 videos haven't gotten past 5 views. So I'm starting to branch out. And if anyone wants to check out my stuff, it's on TikTok or YouTube at Analytical Iowan. Thanks, Eric. And of course, Eric's been on the show a couple of times, most recently. Always very insightful, always has a great point of view. I'll tell you this, Eric, regarding TikToks and throttling your views. That kind of thing happens from time to time. It hasn't happened to me for a while. Sometimes it does. But it happened to me way back, and I thought, what can I do? Can I tell people to do the, you know what? Just keep doing what you're doing. Work yourself through it, and it will come back around. It doesn't. There's no point in worrying about it and getting stressed out about it. Just do what you do. Like I've told you before, Eric, and I've told other people too. And I think, well, Eric knows this, and Eric's a pretty solid, intelligent guy, so he understands this. If you're doing TikToks or if you're doing podcasts or if you're doing YouTube or Instagram and you're doing it solely to get views, that's the priority. How do I get more views? How do I get more views? You're doing it the wrong way. What you do is you go out there, do the best you can, and let the chips fall where they may. And if you keep doing it and you're diligent about it and you're determined with it and you're consistent with it, the views will come, the followers will come. Don't worry about that. Worry about the content. Worry about it being the best it can be and just fucking keep doing it. All right. And Eric's doing a great job. If you haven't checked out his TikTok or now on YouTube, um, you should do it because it's good stuff. All right. We've been talking about the jury selection yesterday, and that pretty much consumed the third day for Trump's hush money trial. Now, all jurors, all 12 jurors were seated by the for the Trump hush money trial after 2 were dismissed uh, earlier. They came in with 7, they lost 2, and then they got 7 more. And now we have all 12. We have the jury set for the trial. Now it's just a matter of alternates. Now, dozens of jurors were almost immediately excused after admitting they could not be fair or impartial during the politically divisive trial. I heard one of the people that weren't selected interviewed, and they said, you know, we sat there for 8, 9 hours, had no idea what we're in for. Then all of a sudden we're sitting there and there's big, fat, dumpy Donald Trump. Now, she didn't say that, but I'm sure she was thinking it, and they were completely surprised of what was in front of them. So some of these people, and you know, to see what's happening with this thing, it's becoming embarrassing for some of these juror candidates because they're going back in history 5, 10 years looking at social media posts by these people, and if they're ranting against Donald Trump, and I mean, who the fuck isn't? They'll bring that out and they'll show it in court and say we can't have them because this person said that Donald Trump shits his pants. So it's a tough experience for these people that are candidates to be the jurors, and some of these people just said, "Fuck it, I can't be impartial." I mean, if they came to me and said, "Do you want to be on the jury?" I said, "Well, if you need to be impartial, clearly I'm not." Can you imagine if they checked my social media? It would take fucking days. And you know what they wouldn't find? They wouldn't find anything positive about Donald Trump. Now, each side, the defense and prosecution, only has about a handful of strikes left. Trump briefly spoke to reporters outside the courtroom as he departed for the day. He says, "I'm supposed to be in New Hampshire. I'm supposed to be in Georgia. I'm supposed to be in North Carolina and South Carolina," Trump said. "I'm supposed to be 100 different places campaigning, but I'm here all day on a trial that is really an unfair trial," which is interesting because he had yesterday's day off and he didn't go anywhere. You would think you had a day off. You got your own fucking plane. You could hit all these places in one day and probably do just fine. I mean, Joe Biden's doing it. So, excuse me if I don't feel sorry for you. Now, the former president complained that he had to sit in a freezing room for hours. Now, I've heard some reporters say that this room is freezing. Not sure why. I don't know what the temperature out there is, but it is freezing in there. So hopefully they'll be able to get the heat situation figured out. Donald Trump went on to say the whole world is watching this hoax, bemoaning we have no justice and have a press that doesn't want to cover the facts. Wah fucking wah. I love when Donald Trump is whining and crying. Now, prosecutors in Donald Trump's criminal trial argued in court Thursday that with a steady stream of social media posts, Mr. Trump had violated the gag orders we talked about, imposed on him 7 times, urging the judge overseeing the trial to hold him in contempt. And like I was saying before, when that happened the night before, we thought, oh, Judge Juan Marchand is going to drop the motherfucking hammer. But he didn't. In fact, the judge said he would wait to decide on the request until after a hearing he'd already scheduled for Tuesday about 3 other allegations that had already been raised by prosecutors. So we're talking about 7 to 10. Now, Christopher Conroy, a prosecutor in the Manhattan District's office, said, it's ridiculous. It has to stop. And I agree. I agree. He's obviously damaging the court case. He's making it a circus. He's intimidating the jury. And I understand you have a hearing next Tuesday, but don't you want it to fucking stop? Don't you want? I'm hoping that when Judge Juan Marchand starts on Tuesday with this hearing, that he does put the hammer down. He doesn't take that first step with a small fine and then say, next time you're in trouble. Too late for that. He's done it next time and the time after and the time after. Now, the gag order bars the former president from attacking witnesses, prosecutors, jurors, and court staff, as well as their relatives and relatives of the judge. But that's exactly what he's doing. He's attacking the witnesses and the jurors, not to mention the judge and all of this stuff. It does have to stop. We've got a serious trial going here, and we can't afford to allow Donald Trump taint this motherfucker. Now, Trump has continued to test its limits by sharing quotes and articles that are critical of his perceived enemies, a tactic that he has used for years to defend his statements while retaining plausible deniability. Now, I was watching Lawrence O'Donnell, and Donald Trump thinks he's doing something here by taking other people's quotes and putting it out there. He's able to say, well, I didn't say that. You can't hold that against me. I didn't say that. But the fact of the matter is that getting other people to say things is against the gag rule too. And like in the instance with Jesse Waters, who said Democratic activists are infiltrating the jury so that they can find Donald Trump guilty illegally and there's corruption and all that stuff. Donald Trump quoted Jesse Waters. He literally typed it out. He didn't take another post. He personally typed it out. And this is what Lawrence O'Donnell said, and it's interesting. He gave the quote, and then after the quote, he added to affect Donald Trump's court case. Now, Jesse Waters didn't say that, but Donald Trump did. So he took this quote from Jesse Waters, altered it, and added to it. So now it becomes his quote, which is directly against the gag order. Like I always say, let him talk. He'll fuck himself every time. I'm interested to see what happens Tuesday. Donald Trump has had so many fucking chances. Time is to stop giving him chances. You've got to stop this. We've got one of the most important cases in the history of this country, a former president, for God's sake. You got to stop him, and you got to stop him fucking now. Now, his lawyers on Thursday sought to preserve his ability to do so during the trial while Mr. Conroy laid out new examples of posts that prosecutors say broke the order and risk inspiring violence against or harassment of people involved in the trial or those close to him. For instance, the president posted a link to a New York Post article that called Michael D. Cohen, his former longtime fixer and key witness in the trial, a serial perjurer, and described the case as an embarrassment for the New York legal system. That's the New York Post. You know who owns the New York Post, don't you? Rupert Murdoch. And it's a fucking tabloid. It's not a newspaper. The link was posted Monday on Mr. Trump's campaign website and again on Tuesday on both that site and his Truth Social platform. Trump attacked Cohen again on Wednesday, prosecutors said, when he posted on Truth Social a link to a National Review article with the headline, "No, Cohen's guilty plea does not prove Trump committed campaign finance crimes." Well, I beg to differ, because the crimes he was convicted of were crimes he was committing for the benefit of Donald Trump. If Michael Cohen is convicted, then Donald Trump should be convicted. I don't care what the fucking New York Times or New York Post says. Common sense and logic tells you what the fuck is up here. Now, a lawyer for Mr. Trump, Emile Beauvais, told the judge that his client's comments should be considered political speech and that he was defending himself from attacks by Mr. Cohen. The most serious violation happened late Wednesday afternoon, Conroy said, when Trump quoted a remark by Fox News commentator Jesse Waters, is what we talked about. So now, earlier this week, prosecutors asked the judge to fine Mr. Trump $3,000 for violating the gag order 3 times, $1,000 for each violation, and that's basically because that's what the law says they should do. But again, the point of that is to get that violation on record, and then when he does it again, it's a much more serious situation. They gave him the chance. He still violated, even though he was punished. Now the only option is to put him in jail. This is going to be a 2-month case, an 8-week case. Donald Trump will certainly violate it again once he's under some stress and people start talking shit about him and evidence is revealed and witnesses speak up. You know he's going to say something. So, like anything in the legal system, there's a process. You can't just act, unfortunately, but that's what's going on. Now it says this issue will not necessarily be decided on Tuesday, though lawyers are expected to make their arguments at the hearing. It is not clear when the judge will issue a ruling. Well, I would hope he'd issue it that day. Like I say, we got a little court case going on that's presumably going to start Monday. We need to shut Donald Trump up unless you're willing to make this fucking trial a circus. And I just can't believe that Juan Marchand is willing to allow that to happen. Now, here's an interesting one. It's almost laughable. Donald Trump's attorneys want his jury to get a disclaimer when they hear Michael Cohen's upcoming testimony in the election interference case involving the hush money. Lawfare managing editor Tyler McBrien revealed a filing from Trump's team that involves his former lawyer's 2018 guilty plea and imprisonment for campaign finance violations and other charges. Cohen said he'd made hush money payments to adult star Stormy Daniels at Trump's direction to avoid her damaging his election chances by talking about the affair. But Trump's lawyers don't want jurors in Trump's trial to link Cohen's guilty plea to the defendant. The Trump team wants jurors to be given an instruction after Cohen testifies that says the following: "You just heard evidence that Michael Cohen pleaded guilty to violating the Federal Election Campaign Act. The evidence is being offered only to help you assess Mr. Cohen's credibility as witness. Mr. Cohen's guilty plea is not evidence of the defendant's guilt, and you may not consider it in determining whether the people have proven any of the elements of the charges." Yeah, but Michael Cohen was convicted of this uh, election issue. But Michael Cohen wasn't running for anything, was he? Donald Trump was. He was working for Donald Trump. He was working at the behest of Donald Trump. So Nice try, motherfucker. Now, the Manhattan District Attorney's team proposed a different instruction saying there has been testimony elicited at this trial concerning Michael Cohen's guilty plea to federal campaign finance violations. This evidence was admitted to provide context for his decision to break from Mr. Trump and to assist you in assessing Mr. Cohen's credibility. You may not consider the guilty plea itself to be evidence of the defendant's guilt. Another request is for instructions to be given after National Enquirer's David Pecker testifies. Pecker is said to have been involved in setting up the scheme to pay Daniels. In that case, Trump's team asks the jurors are told that Pecker made a deal with prosecutors, though the details of that deal have never been made public. What they're basically trying to do is, okay, you've got these damning witnesses. We want you to discount them. Tell the jury that they're not important. Well, that's not going to happen. And jurors aren't stupid. When they hear what they hear, they'll know of its importance. But I give these motherfuckers credit. They keep trying, don't they? They keep motherfucking trying every goddamn time. But they're going to fail. Donald Trump will get convicted of multiple felonies in this case. And then we will be witnessing the crumbling of Donald Trump, the end, the demise of Donald Trump. Now, one of the things that I've said all along, and now we're hearing this from a former White House aide of Donald Trump's, Alyssa Farah Griffin. Now, granted, she's now working in the media and she's not feeling it for Donald Trump anymore, but she makes a good point. Former President Donald Trump feels uniquely powerless and helpless in the New York hush money trial, with no ability to control the situation or command the narrative. That's what Alyssa Farah Griffin said. This came after the former president gave a disgruntled and disorganized rant just outside the Manhattan courthouse, where he complained about the temperature of the courtroom, reiterated that he was being persecuted, and waved around clippings from right-wing media outlets criticizing the case. Now, Wolf Blitzer on CNN was talking to Alyssa. He said, "This is very interesting, Alyssa. What did you make of what Trump's railing when he emerged from the courtroom at the end of the session today, just moments ago, and when he was talking about how cold it was? He was freezing inside the courtroom." Now, Griffin said, "Listen, he's uncomfortable. He doesn't control the situation. He's not on his golf course in Florida. He's not on his Air Force One where he controls the dials. I think this is hard for him, and I think aides probably see him come out and telegraph his message." He then briefly went on to say he wished he'd been in some battleground states, but he's supposed to be using these moments to make some kind of campaign message to say, "I'd like to be out there talking about the issues the American people care about." And that's kind of failed to materialize so far this week, other than just complaining and playing the victim. He's yet to effectively use that sort of captive moment of the media to say anything that ever leans into the campaign speech. And that's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. What he should be doing in those times is not complaining and whining and bitching and pissing and moaning. He should be giving some kind of message about policy so the people can get a sense of who he is when the election comes up. But he just can't do that. He's not capable of doing that. He's going to whine and cry about his situation, even though he put himself in this situation. So these few times he has an opportunity to speak to the media, he can't even take that time to campaign because he's too busy fucking whining. And that's going to be a problem for him. He's going to be in this court case every day for 2 months, 4 days a week, 8, 10 hours a day. And all that time he's spending, he's not going to be able to campaign. Now, think about how problematic that is. You're running for the presidency of the United States, and you don't have the money or the time or even the platform anymore to campaign. And the moment you do get an opportunity to speak to the people, instead you whine about how big a victim you are. You can kind of see how that's going to play out for the election coming up in November. We're all going to know how bad he's whining, but we won't know what he plans to do, which is probably fair because he didn't do anything the first time he was president. There is no platform, there is no strategy, there is no policy, so he wouldn't have anything to say anyway. But none of this works well in campaigning for the November election. She went on to say it underscores just how hard it's going to be for him to campaign from the courtroom. Yeah, it's going to be hard. It's going to be virtually impossible. How do you campaign as you're being convicted of multiple felony charges? It's a problem for him. And that's what I've told you before. Between the pressure and the limited time he's going to have to talk to his people, it's going to make it very hard for him in this particular campaign. All right. We are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day. I hope you have a great day, and we will talk to you again tomorrow.